Joining us now is new book, Contempt, a memoir of the Clinton investigation. And we all know where that ended up. Ken Starr, who has known Brett Kavanaugh for decades, as has I. And I know he has some thoughts on this ongoing controversy, and hoping to get some insights from him at this point. Judge, it's good to talk to you. Your reaction to how this late in the game hit as occurred against Brett Kavanaugh.
Well, hi, Laura, and thanks for having me on. Well, I have known Brett Kavanaugh since 1994. I've not discussed this latest with him, but what I do know is that Brett Kavanaugh is a person of total integrity, and he's denied it. That's good enough for me. I have the deepest concerns with the fairness of the process. I don't hear anyone talking about, well, why did this come forward so late? July, why was it sat on? It's as if it doesn't matter. And, fairness is such an important part for the process for the country. It's not just for Judge Kavanaugh. Certainly this is unfair to him, but it's the fairness to the process for the country. And I heard a United States Senator on the Democratic side of the aisle say about 48 hours ago, I'm still going through his opinions. I'm still looking at the record and so forth. I'm doing a deep dive. Well, now apparently all that work that the Senate did, it doesn't matter. It's all about this 11th hour charge. So I think it's an unfair process individually and as part of what the Senate should be doing and having an orderly, predictable kind of process. So 11th hour, it gives new meaning to that.
Yeah. Well, he had 6 FBI background checks. 6. None of this was brought out. Obviously, this accuser. I guess Brett's name came up apparently in some setting in a therapist's office with couples therapy in 2012, and that was when his name really was mentioned by prominent media outlets as a possible future Supreme Court justice under a Republican president. And that's when supposedly these notes were written up, and those now are in the hands of the committee, which in and of themselves, the notes contradict what the accuser is saying. She said there was four boys, and it was late teens. Then she said in another setting, she said she was 15, and now apparently she says she doesn't know when it was. Again, there's no defending against this. This is why it's such an insidious charge. You cannot defend against something that happened over 30 years ago as a teenager when everybody, she says everybody was blotto drunk, even if it happened.
The entire thing is so regrettable. A high school episode. When you think about Brett Kavanaugh, his years at Yale as an undergrad, his years at the Yale Law School, his serving as a law clerk, 3 different years as a law clerk. I came to know him in the Solicitor General's office when he was a Bristow Fellow. And then the rest of his career, which has been a very public career, even his private practice days, and an exemplary career. And now here are 60-plus young women, now middle-aged women, but who knew Brett as an honorable kid. So it's so remote and it's so out of character for Brett. But here's the key for me. Brett denies it. He does not say, and I recount this in the book, Contempt, I don't recall, not that I recall. Mm-hmm. And that was what Hillary did all the time, and even Bill Clinton at times, even though he had a better memory. We think he lied under oath with respect to his involvement in the Whitewater thing, but we didn't have enough evidence to prove that. It's so easy to make charges. And so I don't want to get into the merits of this other than to say Brett Kavanaugh has decades, as well as 6 FBI investigations, as you rightly pointed. He has decades of exemplary service, and see what his women law clerks said about him. And just that no longer apparently matters to some folks who are just determined for him to be stopped for on any basis whatsoever, including a very, very strange 11th hour basis.
What would you say to the Senate Senate Republicans here who are wanting to put off this hearing?
I would say stand firm. Let her come forward and hear her story. And it can be an executive session or whatever. But I would say stay the course. It's simply too late. It's a process objection that I think is profoundly important to the dignity of the Senate.
Well, the Democrats are painting it as, see, you don't care about women. You claimed you cared about all these women during the Ken Starr saga with Monica Lewinsky and Kathleen Willey, but it turns out it's only when, your guy is up for a seat in the court that suddenly you're like, oh, you shouldn't look at these charges. I mean, they're comparing apples to oranges on this, but you know how it goes. I mean, right. You'll never get another female vote in the United States if you push this thing through. And then you got Corker and Flake, who hate Trump, obviously, and they're just like, well, we just don't think you should vote now.
Yeah, well, I strongly disagree. I mean, we have had this elaborate process. This has been in the public domain for people to come forward. And again, why did a United States Senator, Dianne Feinstein, if I understand the facts correctly, then sit on this? Because, first of all, it came in as an anonymous charge. And so you could just see that, okay, there's concern that this is anonymous. Okay, so just days before the scheduled vote, now the anonymity evaporates and a willingness to testify. As if we're going to create the world anew and not, again, I'm a process guy, and process is very important to the orderly operations of government. Process is important, period, not just in courts. But the Senate is sitting in judgment. And there comes a point when you say, hey, statute of limitations, or the record is closed, or there are devices to say we can't just allow this process to be run totally amok. And I fear, and I know I'm using very strong language, I tend to avoid that, but I think there is a profound injustice here to the process, quite apart to Judge Kavanaugh and his family.
There's a piece, and this dovetails into your book, Contempt, in Politico today, why God is laughing at Brett Kavanaugh. American politics is about power. This is John Harris, not principle. If anyone should know this, it's Brett Kavanaugh. And basically says, here's Kavanaugh, who spent his early 30s as a Ken Starr warrior pursuing Bill Clinton for the political and legal implications of his most intimate moral failings. Now in his early 50s, facing a political crisis over disturbingly vivid, passionately contested, decades-old allegations. So basically, he says, Judge, that few prosecutors would obviously can't bring a case against Brett, but few prosecutors in the 90s would have pursued an extensive criminal investigation over perjury about lies about adultery if it weren't Bill Clinton. So the left is gleefully saying, you deserve it, given what you and Starr and the gang did to Clinton.
Oh, that's just so mean-spirited because it conveniently overlooks the fact that the Lewinsky phase of the investigation, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to set the record straight in the book, was authorized by Janet Reno, Bill Clinton's attorney general. People just ignore that. They know it. I mean, John Harris knows that, but he chooses not to say the investigation that Brett Kavanaugh was involved in was duly authorized by the Attorney General of the United States and by 3 judges under the Independent Counsel statute. And then he tries to play it as a morality play. It's the same old song that was fairly effectively sung by many people on the Democratic side of the aisle in the 1990s. Yet here is a president found in contempt, and thus the name of the book. The name of the book emerged from the fact that the President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton, was held in contempt of court by a federal district judge, the first and may it be the only time in American history. Talk about apples and oranges. You're absolutely right. We're in different universes.
Does it concern you at all that the attorney for this accuser actually took the side of Bill Clinton back in 1998? She said that Jones's allegation could not hold up in court because, quote, clearly a one-time incident that took place in 10 to 12 minutes, that she was not forced to have sex, she left on her own volition. The courts increasingly are finding that this is not enough to create a sexually hostile work environment claim. And she continued to argue throughout the 90s that Jones could not show that harassment was severe and persuasive. She's obviously very, very left-wing, but she said Paula Jones's suit is very, 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 very weak.
Yeah. Well, Laura, I always learn something when I listen to you. I just learned something. I didn't know that aspect of it. I did know that this lawyer, I don't know her, I don't think I know her at least, but is a very politicized lawyer, very much on the left wing. So I think that needs to be evaluated as well, just in terms of, okay, I will take the case now, but I wouldn't have taken Paula Jones's case because I like Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
So there's the hypocrisy factor, and everybody is a little hypocritical, but this is a pretty hypocritical. But I don't want to get into a personal assault. I want to get back to a process. Is the Senate going to operate in a deliberate and orderly fashion, sort of the order of the House? Order of the House. Well, what does that mean? It means that there are rules and there are processes. And, Felix Frankfurter, one quick quote, but this conversation just reminds me, Felix Frankfurter, a justice of the Supreme Court, wrote, "The history of liberty is largely the history of procedure." So procedure either counts or it doesn't. And I think that this is a time that people need to step back. I know there's a fury developing and has developed and so forth, and say, we're going to proceed as United States senators who had a process. I think Lindsey Graham said, let's just get this over with very, very quickly in terms of an FBI investigation or whatever. I just hope that wise and cool heads will prevail and say, there are reasons for statutes of limitation.
Right. Well, that would seem the right way to go, but politics this kind of politics is just smear politics, and there's no, all of that makes total sense. But these people on Capitol Hill are all running scared. They're just all running scared. They're petrified of what they felt like after Anita Hill hearing. Oh, I have to apologize. I was so mean to Anita Hill. So they're all afraid, Judge.
Yeah, well, I think that's misguided. But one of the things that we should have in all of our elected officials is courage and backbone. This is the right thing. This is the party of Lincoln we're talking about. Stand firm, be courageous if you're in the right. And I must say, Brett Kavanaugh should be confirmed. Akhil Amar of the Yale Law School put it very well early on, a liberal law professor of constitutional law. He deserves over 90 votes. Right now, I'll be happy with 51, but he does deserve to be confirmed. And the Supreme Court deserves to have this very able justice there. Here's process again. They're about to go into court, right? October 1, it's 2 weeks away. And so the Senate has had this summertime to reflect, to study, to have these days of confirmation hearings, pro and con and so forth. I say call the question.
Judge Starr, your book is fascinating. It's available on lauraingraham.com and also on our Facebook page, a memoir of the Clinton investigation. Frankly, now more important than ever to read this book. You have to understand the pressures on everyone involved who was trying to actually follow a process and get to the ultimate truth of what an investigation that was duly authorized. And it's very important to read it. Judge, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. 855-40-LAURA. We have a fantastic show on tap tonight on the Ingraham Angle. And I'll be also delving into how the billionaire Republicans are still betting on China, which means betting against Trump. That tonight on the Ingraham Angle. Thanks for listening to this podcast excerpt of The Laura Ingraham Show. If you'd like to receive podcasts of our complete shows, go to lauraingraham.com and sign up to become a member of Laura 365. Our Laura 365 members get commercial-free streams and podcasts of our shows every day we're on the air. And also, you can listen to the last 30 days of The Laura Ingraham Show. Be ahead of the curve. Join Laura 365.